the reason we are still doing it is because it is the whole ballgame. It is. The reason women got in this jam in the first place was because our bodies are the most basic means of production, the means of reproduction. And the desire of various kinds of patriarchal systems to decide how many children, what race, what, so on, workers and soldiers, and to own them in systems of legitimacy. That's the whole thing. That's it. I mean, that's how, and it's important to remember it wasn't always like that. That for the first 90% or 95%, I mean, only for about 600 years on this continent, and no more than 5,000 anywhere, have we had patriarchy. For 95% of human history, we had matrilineal systems in which women controlled their own fertility. The people who were living on this land, were they, do you think? They're part of the Iroquois Confederacy, maybe? Maybe Cherokees? Not sure. But the people who lived on this land before Europeans showed up, women controlled their own fertility with abortifacients and herbs and so on, and an understanding of timing. They spaced their kids. They often waited until the previous child was 6 before they had another child. The female elders chose the chief, could depose the chief, decided when to go to war, when to... It was about balance. It wasn't matriarchy, which we don't want either. And it certainly wasn't patriarchy, but it was matrilineal. So I say that just because I've begun to find it helpful to think of history vertically, like who lived here. If you think of it linear, it seems too far away somehow. But I go out in Central Park and I put my hand on those huge outcroppings of igneous rock and I think, people who put their hand here once lived differently. And we can do that too, not to romanticize the past, not to go backward, but to understand that though they try to tell us that it's human nature and so on, it's actually relatively new. Maybe we should declare today the first, let's see, well, we'll just declare the last 5,000 years an experiment that failed. Meeting of the post-patriarchal, post-racist. But anyway, I just want us to make this linkage, to understand that it is all about controlling reproduction and saying and restricting sexuality, at least female sexuality, into only areas in which you can have children and the children are properly owned in systems of marriage, patriarchal marriage, and so on. And that is redoubled and hugely increased by any kind of racism. The only way you can maintain a racial hierarchy is dictating who marries whom, right? So there's a reason why, especially in the south of this country, we should all understand this, because miscegenation was the most punished crime historically, and still is. Much more reliably, I mean, it's still historically the most punished, much more reliably than murder or theft or arson, because for a man of color to take over the body of a white woman, which was the means of production of the ruling class, would in the long run eliminate so-called racial purity, or at least a visible difference. It was never forbidden the other way around. I mean, it was forbidden even clearly out of love and free choice, between a white man and a woman of color. But with a white, did I say that right? No, okay. But between a white man and a woman of color, it was okay. It wasn't even miscegenation, because even out of rape or violence, it just gave birth to more people marked on their skins as cheap labor. All right, I'm saying this much too short, and I know you know it already, but I think it's because this last election has driven me crazy with the notion that sex and race are opposed, as opposed to intertwined. There is no way to be a successful feminist without being anti-racist. And there is no way to be a successful anti-racist without being a feminist. And there we had two candidates, Obama, who's a feminist, and Hillary Clinton, who's a longtime civil rights advocate. And they were supposed to be opposed, excuse me. I mean, I started to think somebody had put them up against each other just, you know, to stop us, you know. And the media fed this. So it's so important that we understand that they're intertwined. You cannot uproot them separately. We can only uproot them together. And there's one other thing that's obviously parallel and obviously linked, because all the movement, you know, you'd think we get it just because these movements all come together. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay and lesbian movement. They not only come together here, they come together in every other country. In Germany, between World Wars I and II, they came together. They always come together because women, to save our lives and our health, we have to separate sexuality from reproduction. We have to be able to do that if we wish to do that. And sex between two men and between two women stands for sexuality as a form of expression, not only a means of reproduction. There's a reason why our adversaries are all the same people. That should tell us something by itself. On campuses, people sometimes say to me, well, how come they're both against lesbianism and contraception? It's not illogical. You know, it's because they're against any form of sexual expression that can't end in having children and with the children owned, you know, inside patriarchal marriage. It just is. It just is. So I hope we understand that you, in this room especially, are attacking the root of everything. It even sounds radical, doesn't it, to say we're seizing control of the means of reproduction? Because you are working hard in all of its permutations to establish reproductive freedom as a fundamental human right, like freedom of speech, or freedom of worship, or any other freedom, you are attacking the root cause of the masculine and feminine roles, you know, which is all about men dominating women and women being feminine and therefore putting up with it. The root of racism, the way that racism is maintained, class. I mean, if we grow up thinking it's normal in our homes that one kind of human being eats and the other kind of human being cooks, you know, that one kind. Both people live there, but only one cleans. You know, if one both work outside the home, but only one is working. We will accept almost anything after that. That's dug a trench in our brains. So, oh yes, some people are born superior and some aren't, and then class and race and other stuff fit into it. So even experientially, there. But I hope that you understand that this is a long struggle for a reason. This really is the root of everything. And if we succeed, as I believe we are slowly succeeding, in restoring to each individual human being, male and female, the right to make decisions for themselves, maybe this will establish, we may need other legal principles, maybe, I don't know what to call it, but maybe a principle of bodily integrity, because really what we're saying is the government power stops at our skins. And that is important for involuntary testing and for being pressed for transplants. You know, I mean, there are other ways in which that may become a more inclusive principle. But what you are doing here is really crucial. Olof Palme, who was the chief of state in Sweden, always said, and I've been quoting him for all these decades because he's the only chief of state who ever said this, I believe, that the gender roles that come out of the politics of reproduction are the cause of almost all violence on this earth. Just except for violence in immediate self-defense, you know, which is of course part of our survival, but all other violence is normalized by gender roles, and therefore, as he said, it's the duty of every government to humanize and eliminate those gender roles, so we can all be men and women, whatever group we're from, the unique human beings we were born to be. So I thank you for fighting this most important